Hello and g'day! Today's video is how to make snippet rolls and mini snippet rolls. We're going to be doing a paper snippet roll and a fabric snippet roll. You can glue or you can sew. I'm going to show you a glued one with paper and a sewn one with the fabrics. Typically, this little snippets here in a box is what you would be saving. Now these are really tiny snippets. So they're just little snippets of lace and pieces that have been cut off at doily, something that you've received in Happy Mail. You've made something and that's the end of it. So you just pop it in this box. If you haven't got a snippet box, grab a couple or one, doesn't really matter, and just start throwing everything in it so you'll always know where it is. Today I'm going to start with the paper snippet roll. There's another paper roll and they're just all glued. There is no sewing on here whatsoever. It is all totally glued. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make paper snippet roll. I'm using the plasterer's joining tape. It's quite a firm tape and it's perfect for the base of a snippet roll. I taped it down on my mat and I used stencils and some distress ink to get my background pattern. I divided it into 4 and I made 4 different patterns. Once I coloured my areas, I then removed the washi tape. Distress inked the edges and the joins in between. Now I've got my 4 entirely different looks here and I'm going to work out what I want to put on it. But before I do that, I'm going to rip off a couple of the pieces because it's going to be easier for me to show you this one piece, and I'll build this one section and then I'll join them back together. Now I'm just grabbing pieces out of my stash. This is just a piece of one of my book labels, the Ex Libris. I just ripped the corner off it and distress inked the edges and placed it under one of my blank stamps that I put a fussy cut couple of kookaburras on. I've got another faux stamp there and I'm just placing them at the moment just to see if I like the layout of the look. So I'm just grabbing a couple of bits and pieces and I'm just having a look before I commit. This little scrap here is just a bit of bookbinding tape that I pulled off one of the book that I gutted the other day. Little discs, little tags. And here I'm also showing you just a few different things that you should do just to see if this is what you like. Once you find what you like, just lay them down and leave them there. Now when I do figure out what I like, I leave them where they are. I don't pull them all back off. I just lift them up off the corners and I get my glue and I just put the glue underneath where they sit, just like this. I find it's easier than trying to remember where it was that I put them. If I like where I first put them, I like to leave them there. And it's easier for me to just lift up the edges and just put a little bit of glue underneath because you don't need a lot of glue. They just need to be held down. Lift up the edges. Glue that down and then just move on. That way you're not going to forget where it is that you wanted your things to go. And just do that all the way through. Now I like this. I think it turned out really nice. The background just allows me to not have as much stuff on there. So now I'm going to put it back together. I'm going to use my rip edge as a feature. So I'm going to pull the piece on the right back out and glue the piece that I just collaged, if you like, back on top. I'll talk you through the whole snippet roll of how and what I put on each piece. The first snippet roll I made out of paper is just offcuts from tea-dyed paper. I just joined a few pieces together, and that's how wide the offcut was, so that's how wide I made the snippet roll. This end here is a portion of one of my book labels, so it's just an ex libris. So I thought that looked a bit interesting, so instead of gluing it on the top, I glued it on the back. Then I glued a little book, a mini book with a vintage pin on it. That's a sticker, and some computer printed words there. That is a free printable off the internet. Glued a flower, added the pearl, glued just a random number. That is a recycled tag off one of our clothing items. That is a recycled medallion off a card. That is Edith Holden book page on top of the tag. That is just a leftover scrap, and I glued a little key on top. That is just a stamped piece of paper underneath with a tiny bit of lace trim. That is a feather sticker, and that is just a piece of washi tape. Another little paper flower, and that's a cotton spool that I made. I cut that out of scrapbook paper, and I just wrapped a bit of thread around it. That's just a tag, and I punched some holes in it. I just glued it down at the bottom, and that's offcut grid paper, and that's a leftover piece of a ticket. Just pop that in there. That there is a piece of vellum paper. I just glued the corners to turn it into a pocket, and that is also a recycled tag from clothing. Left the string in it as it was and glued a torn piece of sticker over the top. That is fussy cut out of a magazine. That's another sticker. That is a fabric fussy cut that my mum cut out, and I glued that over the top of Edith Holden ripped paper page. That's also some fussy cut leaves that were in my mum's things. And the Love Warms Every Garden are 2 discs. The background, I cut just a plain green paper, and then that is in my free printables, the Love Warms Every Garden. The skeleton leaves were in my mum's things, so I just glued those on as well, but just left the edges free. I left the edges free on the little kookaburra too. It just adds a bit more interest. Glued some more of the flowers down. The cutout from the magazine with the bees on it, and I just this time glued it over the top of a little tag that was in my mum's things. That's a real postage stamp that I left on the envelope. That is a part of the envelope. I just got the envelope, tore it off the corner, and then slipped the corner over the edge of the snippet and glued it down at the back. And then once it was glued at the back, I glued it at the front, and then got my cling stamp and partially stamped over the top of this little white tag here, glued it over the top, and that's also a piece of Edith Holden text off her paper page. Everything is glued down. I haven't used any sewing on this whatsoever. So it's good if you don't have a sewing machine. This type of finish is perfect for you. Just glue everything down. And most of this stuff I made myself. It didn't cost me a lot at all. I used all magazines and offcuts to make this one. This one's pretty much the same, but what I used on this one was the tape that plasterers use when they're doing home renovations. So I've used one piece of tape and then I washi taped over each piece, made each piece a different colour and done a transfer. So once I've got my background in 4 different colours, then I just come along and I add washi tape, paint chips, my little round sentiments again. I made this tag and I used the same paper as I made my snippet roll, so it matched. At the end, I ripped it and I cut a tag end. I just cut off a piece of the plasterer's tape, got my tag punch and just popped that in there, cut my tag end and coloured it to match, and then just glued it behind it, leaving the exposed rip piece there. And that gave me a little bit more interest at the end of my snippet roll. So now when I cut this off and go to use it on a tag or in my book, I've got some interest at the end. And the same on this end. I ripped it deliberately and glued my flowers over the edge so that it looks interesting when I use it. So I've added paint chips as a background. I've added a little number off a fashion pattern, a little bit more of my hand-drawn ex libris label. This is one of my blank stamps that I often use. I just cut out a blank stamp, glued some book page on it, fussy cut the kookaburras and glued that down. This here is one of the stamps that I made that's also available as a printable on my website. I just cut that out and glued that down with a little bit of trim glued behind it and glued another little tag over the top of that. Here's some die cut trim that was in my mum's thing, so I just glued that over the top. Another blank stamp, paint chip. I glued the paper clip on top of the paint chip just to add a bit of interest. Over the top went some washi tape. This here is a piece of glassine envelope. I just glued it at the back only, not at the front, so it's totally free all the way to the edge, and I can use that as a belly band and slip what I want in it. Put a bit of washi over the top just to tie in the whole lot if I happen to use this all throughout the same journal. And that's just a tag with a little verse on it to do with a garden, and that sits in there. This here is a flower that I made out of a doily, and all I'd done was I got this doily here. I bought some of this beautiful washi tape, and when I got the washi tape I was given these 2 lovely doilies with it, so I just cut out the tiny little bit of this flower, and I thought, this part of the doily would make a really nice mini flower to put on these snippet rolls. So I made a miniature doily out of a bigger doily, and I just got some offcuts of string out of my little snippet box, and I just glued them down, glued the doily on top and made a spiral string for the middle and glued that down, and that gave me a little bit of a wild rose. Same there, same there. That's just a tag that I used my white gel pen on, and once I put the white gel pen on it looked a little bit too white for a vintage look, so I just brush over the top of it with a bit of distress ink, and that makes it all blend in. Another ticket over the top, that's just the packaging that I got when I received my Barely Art glue, my new glue, which I used to glue this stuff down, and I can highly recommend it. So if you've been sitting on the fence about the Barely Art glue, I suggest that you grab some. It's excellent. Okay, so that's them 2. They're the paper snippets, not a bit of stitching inside, no sewing whatsoever, 100% glued. We all tend to like the same things when we create with our junk journals. We all like buttons. We all like hearts. We love pearls. So these are flat back pearls, so they're perfect for snippets. We love using butterflies. This here is a bit bulky. You could make a snippet roll with something this bulky on it if you were going to use that little piece on a tag or a cover that was going to be on the outside of your journal. I wouldn't suggest making your snippet roll too bulky if you want to use any of it inside your journal. If you like pink, you just find everything you've got that's pink. So just go through everything that you've got and bring it all together and see how all these colours just work together. This is a piece of lace that I used to tea dye with, and now I know that I can use it as, you know, take little pieces off and use it in my snippet roll. This is a bit big, but if we cut it, we can use it. This here is one of those little satchels that you put in your drawer. It's got lavender in it. Now the smell of the lavender is long gone. Once I cut that open, it's got a beautiful stamp on it because it's been handmade, and I can use this on my snippet roll as well. This here is surgical gauze. I opened up the packet this morning. I just done this just to show you. Opened up the packet, sat it in some tea water, and then just dried it. So when I dried it at my fireplace, and it just went darker here on the edges. That is going to be perfect. I can cut that up. I can fray the edges of it, and you'll see that. I'll use a bit of that. So if you haven't got any of these pretty hankies, I've had these hankies for 20, 30 years. I've been collecting hankies, and this one here I've tea dyed, both of them. These I haven't. A muslin type cotton, and I've tea dyed that. This is vintage calico from the charity shop. So this is what I'm going to use today for the base of my snippet roll. So I'm not making a very big one. I'm only going to make a short one. I know that was a long introduction. A lot of you ladies like to see a bit of inspiration on what you can use for your snippet roll. Find something, just go through everything. When I first started today, I thought, I don't have a lot of lace. I don't have a lot of fabric. I don't have a lot of this stuff that I can make a fabric snippet roll out of. 30 minutes later, I've got everything here that I just showed you. So let's get started and make a fabric snippet roll. I'm not going to be showing you the sewing part of it. I'm just going to show you how I'm going to lay it all out and start putting it together. It's not a difficult make. Even if you haven't got a sewing machine, you can glue. I've got this new glue called Barely Art. It's a precision craft glue. It'll stick fabric to fabric. So you can make a snippet roll out of fabric using glue. Okay, so you don't have to have a sewing machine. The first thing we need to do is we need to work out how wide the snippet roll is going to be. You need to work out whether you want a firm piece of fabric or you want a soft piece of fabric. Now I'm pretty happy with this being soft because by the time I build it up, by the time I start laying stuff over the top, it's going to get a bit heavier. I just want to work out how wide I want it. So I'm going to just do a little snip. I'm going to visually work out how wide I want it. I don't want it too wide. I'll go there. Just do a snip and a rip. I'm just unrolling that little roll that it made itself when I tore it. Now you can start off in two ways. You can just start popping everything on there, whatever you want to do. I would put probably the darker things on the background, the prettier things to the top, whatever you want to put on the back to make the things on the front pop. So I think I might go ahead and choose what I want on the background. So I'm not taking any care. I'm not measuring. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just cutting. See, it's not neat at all. You can have it the same or you can mix it up. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so now that's on there. I can just sort of start building it up from here. I'm ripping most of this stuff, making everything not the same. I don't want it to be the same so that it doesn't look too perfect. There we go. So rather than just go to the machine with just two pieces, I'm building it up now. So let's have a look and see whether or not this is going to work. I think it will. Pull a bit of this material off to get it a bit messy as well. So how's that looking for a base? The gauze, as I said, we can get this looking pretty messy. I don't know if I can rip this. I think it won't rip, but when you've cut it, you then pull it. So you pull it all like that to get it all skewy. I think that's going to look pretty mad under there as well. I know you're probably thinking, oh no, you're covering up a lot of that pretty lace, but you do see it. It is still there. And I can put that under there if I want, which I do like better. So change your mind. You are not stuck. When you lay it out like this, you're able to move it around, change the bottom to the top and vice versa. So don't think that just because you've put it somewhere that that's the way you're going to leave it. There we go. So that colour there was just too white, even though it's aged. So I just whacked a bit of tea on it and dried it by the fire, and I'm going to stitch that down. And I cut up one of the hankies. I just cut off the trim off the end and I put that there. So as I sew all of these layers down, I'll catch these little flowers on top. Now I've sewn that row down. I'm ready to put my next layer on. The fabric's always fun to make. Not everybody has vintage lace and beautiful lace on hand. So that's when it is really good for you to then just come and make your paper snippet rolls. There's nothing wrong with the paper snippet rolls. I think they're beautiful. So don't be disappointed. Wait until you go to your charity shops and start collecting all your bits and pieces. That was a hanky. That was just a piece of lace trim. That was another piece of off-cut fabric, and I just cut out that shape. You know, it didn't come like that. That was a piece of lace. None of these were this color. They were all white, and I tea stained them. This was a piece of cheap fabric from Spotlight. I tea dyed it. This was the corner of the hanky. All I done was fold it over and rolled it up there and just put it on an angle. That piece of cloth there is what I was doing my testing on when I was setting up the sewing machine ready to sew these pieces on. I thought, I'm not wasting that. I'm going to sew that in there as well. this here, the same, the test piece, but I folded it over the top to turn it into a tag, so start collecting your bits and pieces and putting them aside and sew down anything. Once you've done that, you'll be okay to make up a snippet piece. Ask your friends and family, do they have any little bits and pieces, and start collecting them. And once you've got enough, you'll be able to make something like this. This here was totally different when I started off. And I just cut off the ends and cut off the loops and tea-dyed it. And it looks totally different now to what it was. Again, I've done the same on the end here so that it didn't just suddenly stop. Let your ends finish with a little bit of a decoration on them. And the mini. I love the little mini snippet. I'm going to probably make a lot more of the mini snippets than the full-size ones. I think they're adorable. Now, making a snippet roll can be time consuming. I'm not going to lie. It takes ages. So this one here is the bigger one that I started showing you that I was making earlier. This is it with the pieces all sewn. So I'll show you this one in a minute. But I want to show you the mini version. So this is just a mini snippet roll. None of this is glued or sewn down. What I'm going to do is just, rather than show you every single little piece, I've just staged everything. I've just sat everything on there. I've picked out the tiniest little pieces of everything. The handkerchief that I cut the trim off to do this piece here, I thought, well, now I've cut into that, I'll use the edge of that to use for my snippet roll, and it's got that really nice edge sewn on one side. So then I started using bits and pieces of trim to cover up the raw edge. I've also tea-dyed nearly every little piece of lace. That bit there's not tea-dyed, and this piece here is not tea-dyed. That piece there, all I've done is cut a piece off a doily and just set it under there. So instead of putting it on the top of the hanky, I'm putting it underneath. And that's just a offcut, sitting it there. So I just keep on placing things until they fill in all these spots. This bit here is just the tiniest little flat back pearl. I'm going to put a few of them on when I'm finished. And this here is just offcuts. It's just pieces of frayed fabric. It just was the bits that frayed off the raw edge. So I just bunch them all up and I'll sew them in or glue. So what I'm going to do with this piece off camera, because it's way too fiddly to do on camera, is I'm going to use my glue and I'm going to sew. So I'm going to do a combination of both. And when I do a bit of zigzagging stitches on here, it'll add to it as well. So I'll do that and I'll be back. Now I've stitched down the center, just doing a zigzag, and it's caught all these little pieces in. So I've moved them around a little bit as to how I first showed them, and it's back to what I said to you on the big snippet roll. You can change things up as you go. Change it if that's not where you finally want it to be. I want you to put these together with the idea of, okay, well, how do you want to use it? Do you want to roll it around a spool, or do you want to cut it and use it on tags or in a journal? If you want to cut it, I've sort of made this up with a plan. Lay it out in mind that you're able to, just throw a cut in the middle of it somewhere. But I'm thinking this area here is a little bit light on, so it could use a little bit more. So you just need to fill it in. You can use pearls just come back and add something to it. I could have left it like that forever and a day. Come the day I want to use it and put it in my journal, then add something to it. Now I'm going to call that finished. I'm pretty happy with that, like that. The mini snippet roll, another way to use up your tiny little scraps if you don't feel that you've got enough to make the regular size snippet roll. Pull out every little bit of snippets that you've got. Before you start, it's a good idea to have everything sitting here so that you can just pull in bits and pieces and save all of these loose threads, because they make ideal little backgrounds to go behind your little snippets. The best advice I can give you is to take your time. Don't try and make it in an hour or two unless you've got lots of bits and pieces and everything falls into place for you. If it doesn't fall into place for you, walk away, come back, move it around and let it just happen. Essentially, it's collaging. So if you've had trouble collaging on paper, do the same. Put a few pieces down, go and walk away, and then come back and change them around. And just keep on doing that until it just sort of looks okay for you. It's got to be what you like. Snippet rolls are fun to make. It's a bit like a brain teaser. That's the word I'm looking for. They're a bit of a brain teaser. When you put something down, you put a lot of things down. You think, okay, that's it. That's got to be easy. But when you start laying things down, it's like, nah, that doesn't work there. Nah, that doesn't work there. Yeah, that looks fantastic. You've really got to have a little think about, do I glue it now? Do I sew it now? Or do I just lay it all down and then straight away start sewing it, stitching it, committing? Or do I wait? Only you will know that answer. You will know that answer when you see what you do as you're doing it. No one can tell you when you should sew, when you should glue, or when you should commit. Only you will know that when you see it laid down. You go, yes, that works. I'm committing. I'm going to stitch it or I'm going to glue it, and then just go straight ahead and do it. Enjoy making your snippet rolls, because I really enjoyed showing you how to make them. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.